All right. We're back. We're back with another Martin Luther King Commission story. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're viewing from. This is Laura Thompson with TAN TV, the African American Network, where we have a local feel with a global reach. And guess who we are getting ready to talk to now? Mr. Mario Salas. So how you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, no problem, no problem. We couldn't do this without, the input of your story.
Well, I'm glad that I'm still around to be able to tell the story. Ain't too many of us left.
Right. So before we get started with the interview, can you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, why you do it, and what your involvement has been in the commission over the years?
Okay. My name is Mario Marcel Salas. I used to be a public school teacher for about 20 years. And then after that, became a professor at UTSA for almost 20 years on that end. And before that, and I teach African American Studies, by the way, and political science, and so I'm in two different departments by virtue of the fact I have two different graduate degrees. So, and then even before that, I was a member of a bunch of different groups. SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, I was a member of that. Member of Mount Zion First Baptist Church when Reverend Claude Black was around, and one of the few civil rights pastors in San Antonio that stood his ground and he was no joke, and he knew how to fight back. And so I've been active in the civil rights movement for a long, long time. Still am to one degree or another, and participated in the first Martin Luther King marches when nobody was there, or just a small number of people was there. And then over the course of time became a city council member in helping to do different things as far as supporting the march. And so that kind of, there's a lot more to tell. I'm a published author, written several books, and I won't even go into that, but there's a bunch of them. And so I'm just glad to be here, still alive. I'm still able to participate in helping the community.
Wow. So Mario Salas has been very instrumental in participating and leading the civil rights movement here in San Antonio back in the day, and like he said, he still is active in advocating and being an activist for particular causes. So can you tell us a little bit about what you know about the commission and if you've ever participated on the commission?
Yeah, well, a long time ago when some of this started, and I have to go back before the days of Reverend Kalish, because I give him credit for what he did, because he popularized it. But actually, there were a couple of marches before he was around. Okay. And one of them, Reverend Black, led a march when Martin Luther King was still alive. And that would have been probably, if I remember right, from Pittman Sullivan Park down to the church, and then from the church to downtown.
Wow.
And it was a protest in support of Martin Luther King, and then being arrested because they marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge to register black people to vote and so forth. Then there was another one that went from Pittman Sullivan Park to Reverend Black's church, to Mount Zion, and that would have been 1972. And Reverend Black's, I think, was even before that. He was the first Martin Luther King march. Doesn't get much credit for it because it wasn't as big as it is now. And then after that, then Reverend Kalish came on the scene. And one of the things I do remember, and there wasn't a lot of people involved in it. You probably heard that story many times. Oh, man, and I do remember when there were 25 people at it. And
wow.
And it got to be bigger. And in all honesty, there were some disagreements with Reverend Kalish about the number of people, because he tended to not want so many people. And I remember another activist and Linda Tippins and others, John Sanders and T.C. Cowart, and others who said, well, the march doesn't belong to any one person, it belongs to all of us. So at that point, we started getting all these community organizations to participate in the march, and we didn't even ask anybody's permission, we just showed up.
Wow.
And so it went all the way from 25 to 50, probably in those first few years, 78, somewhere in there, 25 to 50 to 1,000, and then it just kept on growing and growing and growing, didn't stop. And one of the things that we always wanted to do was to make sure that the flavor of what Martin Luther King stood for was marching, not picnicking, marching, not parading, like in a parade. Although there's nothing wrong with a parade, but we wanted to keep the emphasis placed on what he fought and died for, and how he fought and died, and he did that by marching.
Wow.
So we wanted to maintain the idea that the Martin Luther King March in San Antonio is not a parade, it's a march.
Wow.
And so we've said that, I don't know, many thousands of times over the course of years, and we kept that opinion. So we were able to march with signs that back in the day that said "Free Nelson Mandela" when he was in jail. We were marching with signs that said "End police brutality." We were marching with signs that "Stop racism," et cetera, et cetera. So we took these social issues and made them a part of the march. And of course, some people didn't like that. They wanted a parade and more of a commemoration. But you can't have a commemoration of Martin Luther King without
The Civil Rights March.
without doing what he stood for. And several times it got controversial, and one of the times I do remember was Tommy Calvert, who was the county commissioner at this time. He didn't agree with airplanes flying over the march or tanks in the march because Martin Luther King was a man of nonviolence. And so Tommy Calvert, in his young age back then, when I was a city councilman, by the way, he was my assistant. And I don't, he always makes a joke out of it. He said, "I don't know how you got fired, how I got hired, because I wasn't old enough. I wasn't 15 years old yet." And I said, "Well, maybe I just didn't tell the truth when we hired him." But he turned out to be such a fantastic person. But he complained about those jets flying over and protested it, and they threatened to arrest him at the Martin Luther King March.
Really? I didn't
Yeah,
know.
and if it wasn't for a local lawyer who passed away, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, passed away not too long ago, McKnight, Albert McKnight.
Oh, okay.
Albert McKnight actually stood in between him and the police, and you can't do that, you know. He's got First Amendment protects his right to be against jets
Whatever he
flying
wants,
over.
Right.
Yeah, they wanted to arrest Tommy Calvert. That would have been a
I
bad
didn't hear
mistake.
That part of it. Wow, that's
Yeah, that's a
great
story that's
history.
not told, but it's
Yeah.
true.
Wow.
And he'll tell you himself. So maybe talk to him about that one day,
Okay.
because I'm sure he has more detail than I have. But that happened, and then they were trying to limit. I remember the times they were trying to limit stuff. They didn't want us carrying bullhorns in the march, and I remember the police chief. Well, he was assistant police chief, and then later became police chief. Pittman was
Jerry
his
Pittman?
name. Yeah, and you know, we talked, and well, I didn't have any animosity toward him, but he did try to stop us using the bullhorns, and we all, because he said that's can cause a disturbance of some sort. And I said, yeah, if we were hollering for people to start throwing rocks, yeah, but none of us are doing that. So he said, well, I can arrest y'all or something to that effect if you don't stop carrying the bullhorns. So you know what we did? Well, get out the cuffs because we're not going to stop using bullhorns. So he gave up. He just said, forget it. But we had to enforce the idea that this is a march of freedom. It's a march that supports freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. So you then can't regulate a march like that because then it takes away from what everything that Martin Luther King stood for.
Right.
So those were some of the antics. And then I don't know if any of the other guests you might have had told you about. One night, it was freezing cold. It was sleeting. And we had gotten reports that somebody graffitied Martin Luther King's statue right there on New Braunfels and Easton Street. And I think they were caught later on. Turned out they were some white soldiers from Fort Sam.
Really?
Yeah, they vandalized the statue. And so we decided, because this happens in 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, we decided, well, we're going to stay and watch the guard the statue. And we did. T.C. Calvert was out there with me, other people. And the beautiful thing that happened, because at that time, we didn't get much help from the police, San Antonio police. But Matthew Marshall, who was the head of the constables, the black constable, he said, you told me and TC, y'all can go home, we got it covered. so we had help from all kinds. Catherine Brown is now over the constables now. And so she came at a good time because he did some good stuff. And And so that was very helpful. So there was always some controversy going on about changing the march and all kinds of things, moving it this way, moving it that way. We originally would meet up at Martin Luther King Plaza, New Braunfels and Houston Street. Then we thought it would be better security-wise and other things, although I never kind of agreed with that. I thought the statue was the best place to stop. But then we moved it to Pittman Sullivan Park, which was okay, a nice big park. Marching from Martin Luther King Park to Pittman Sullivan Park. And the reason why Pittman Sullivan Park was chosen because it's real close to where the statue is.
Mm-hmm.
So it ain't like it's a park that doesn't have any meaning. I don't like the name of it anymore. They ought to change the name of that park.
Right.
But the Black YMCA is there.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have a problem with ending up at that location. I'm not in favor of reversing the march the other way, and that has come up several times.
A one-man march.
Yeah,
Protester.
yeah. I ain't gonna mention no name, but I know how that goes. But anyway, I think we've grown. And like I said, go from 25 people to, at the height, 200,000, 300,000, depending on whose numbers you use.
Mm-hmm.
At the height, it went from almost nothing to this biggest march in the country.
Right.
With a few exceptions. Every now and then somebody else gets a bigger one, but not consistently.
Mm-hmm.
Our march is consistent. And so those are some of the obstacles we face. Not all of them, there are many more, but those were major ones: the sleet, the snow, trying to guard the statue from vandalism, the march itself, carrying signs, being able to use bullhorns, having the right to say whatever you want if you didn't agree. There were people carrying signs, didn't agree with the war in Iraq, didn't agree with this war and that war. Well, that's what Martin Luther King would have done.
Right.
So there's nothing wrong with that. That makes the march a real march. So
Wow.
to take modern day issues and make them part of his legacy.
Wow. So you had an opportunity to, not only help organize and build the foundation of the march here in San Antonio before the commission, but then you also had an opportunity to serve as city council and appoint, some commission chairs. So who were some of your appointees?
Well, Charles Shannon was one. He was over the Eastside YMCA. He was also, he had previously been involved in the March Committee and there were different chairpersons of the March Committee. But Charles Shannon was very helpful providing chairs for the seniors where the stage was at so they could sit. Young people can stand up all day.
Mm-hmm.
When you get older, you got to sit down every now and then.
Right.
And so, but Charles Shannon made the Y accessible to that, made the parking lot accessible to that. He was very, very helpful, providing walkie-talkies for the marshals to walk along the march route. And I was able to get a city ordinance naming Houston Street after Rosa Parks. It's called Rosa Parks Way.
Oh, that was you that did that.
And
Okay.
some of the signs are still there.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I need to mention that to the current city councilman to make sure they're still up, because I'm not sure if all of them are still up like they should be. So that's some stuff we did. And funding the march, making sure it was the police protection was there, barricading the route, passing resolutions to do that, and participating in different parts of it as a councilman, and even before that, different parts of it. And so, I did everything within my power, including passing funding that helped out to make sure the march would be successful. And it was. There's no doubt about it. Very, very successful. It's now become an icon. It's now become a legend across the country. So in San Antonio, that's amazing. And part of the reason for that, despite the fact that many Hispanics are no longer with us, but many of them still are, and Hispanics supported the march quite a bit, which we thought was great, and whites too, that believed in freedom and justice for all, like the way it should be. They supported the march as well. So we got a good sprinkling of all kinds of ethnic groups participating, because Martin Luther King didn't belong to no ethnic group. He belonged to everybody.
So I wanted to say that, I've said in all the interviews that like history repeats itself. And so you were instrumental in the civil rights movement, and you're still instrumental in, advocating and using activism to implement change. So, so what do you think the parallel between what happened back in the wake of the civil rights movement and now?
Well, way after the wake of the awakening of the civil rights movement, when Black Lives Matter was really strong. This is another incident I almost forgot about. Black Lives Matter group joined the Martin Luther King March, and they actually did a die-in right either in the street or at the park. And boy, were the police upset about that. But they couldn't stop it. And unfortunately, some of the people on the Martin Luther King Commission didn't like it either. And many other people came to their defense. Well, this is a Martin Luther King march. Why not have that? So they were confused about what is the role of a march. The role of a march is to make people woke. And by the way, I'm still woke.
Right.
So that was something that took place. So in a more modern way, that happened, so that legacy would still have meaning, and I see that all the time. We've had people from the LGBT community join the march and carrying their flags and everything, because everybody ought to be treated like a human being, and you don't have to agree with their lifestyle to treat someone like a human being, and so that was the whole emphasis behind that. And so some of these more modern day movements have joined in marching now that may have not have been so popular back then, and or even attempted to be participants back then. But now you've got a widespread of people from representing different social issues as part of the march. So I think the march has grown with the times in terms of addressing problems we face now. And so even now you'll see people carrying signs that say, stop racial profiling. We know about driving. I saw one last year that said, I know all about driving while black. And so these issues that address opposition to white supremacy and racism are still there, and in many ways gotten worse today. So I think you're beginning to see that kind of those kind of issues being fortified. One other thing that happened that was controversial, when Martin Luther King March takes place at Pittman Sullivan Park, there was a group of people representing the right wing. I call them Christian nationalists. They're white supremacists who claim they're Christians. In my opinion, they're not Christians at all. They're fakes. But they wanted to have a counter protest.
Wow.
Yeah, but claiming to be in support of Martin Luther King, but with all the wrong ideas that have nothing to do with Martin Luther King's thinking. And so they have been meeting right in the back part near the stadium at Martin Luther King. So on Martin Luther King Day, they go back there after having participated in some sort of counter march or driving cars from the Claude Black Center to Martin Luther King Park. So they've tried to sabotage the park. One of them even went so far as to, when City Councilman Rodriguez was offering, before the march, was offering health department to come out and do COVID shots. They even showed up at that and were making all kinds of ugly statements about COVID shots kill people and all kinds of stuff, while Councilman Rodriguez was there. And so that came up not too long ago. Actually at the last march that came up.
Wow.
So people trying to sabotage the march from the right wing, and but we ain't going to put up with that. That ain't going to happen. We're not going to let them do it. And then you had one guy who wanted to reverse the march because he was trying to set up some kind of business on the other end on Martin Luther King Park. I won't call his name out, but he was trying to set up a business and run a train station that he would own, not the community would own, or the city would own, and make money. And that's why he came up with that idea. And not just him, but him. That's why they came up with that idea of reversing the march so they could make money when the crowd shows up at the end.
Wow.
Because you know what happens at the end at Pittman Sullivan, people, black businesses, other businesses, they have their kiosks set up, their tents, selling turkey legs, hot dogs, whatever they sell. So he's thinking the money, and the reason why he wanted to reverse the march is because it was all about making money.
Wow.
And Martin Luther King was not about making money. So, and nothing wrong with making money, but that ain't what Martin Luther King was about.
Right. That's not what we celebrate.
Yeah, go make money off of some other holiday or something.
Wow. So do you think that there's still a need to protest?
Oh yeah, protests never. My God, I tell people that all the time. Look recently at what happened. 7 million people marched. Called it No King's Day. 7 million people in all 50 states. Oh my God, that's the biggest march. That's the biggest march in the country that took place in one day.
Wow.
Biggest march in the country. That bigger than the Million Man March, bigger than Martin Luther King's march. 7 million people. And what did that do? That forced the mayor of New York to win that election. That forced the Republicans to lose elections in New Jersey, Virginia. They lost state Supreme Court positions in Pennsylvania. They lost the Proposition 50 in California with Governor Newsom. So that march actually, I think, pushed forward the idea we're not going to put up with this kind of stuff. In the name of Martin Luther King, we're not going to put up with it. And it worked. It worked. And I think marching, God, I don't know anything that ever was achieved by not marching. You have to march. You have no choice. Protest, march, whatever form it takes, it has a big effect. It has a huge effect. As a matter of fact, the Vietnam War had to end because of marching.
Wow.
So no one can say marching doesn't matter. It means a whole lot, and that ain't going to change. And think about it: 7 million people in the street, all of them probably vote. Most of them vote, or old enough to vote, and then they're in states where senators and congressmen and state reps are not doing the right thing. They can vote them out of office if it gets too much bigger. So politicians, even if they're on the other side, have to pay attention to that. And I'm sure they were sweating bullets when they saw 7 million people marching.
A lot of people, yes. Wow. So this has been a great conversation. So do you have any final words to express about the Martin Luther King Commission and what's one of your fondest memories of participating in the march?
Well, I'm just glad somebody's still there to do the work that has to be done, to get the speakers, whoever they may be, to come in and speak, to people to get young people involved in various activities before the march and during the march. So I'm just glad all of that little stuff is there. Committee. The only thing I'm a little bit upset about, it actually started off as a Bexar County and City Council march. Then Bexar County just pretty much got out of it. But I think that was at a time when there were too many of those other folks on the Bexar County Commissioner's Court. And I don't mean that ethnically, I mean philosophically, who might show up for the march but didn't really care about Martin Luther King. And so the county kind of withdrew, but I think the county needs to get back in it. And I would say that to whoever wins that next election, whether it's Judge Sakai or Ron Nuremberg, which I kind of hate to run it against each other because most of us like both of them. So I kind of hate that.
Can we give them a half a vote apiece?
yeah, half a vote apiece, yeah. So, well, I get my husband or wife to vote for one, and I'll vote for the other one. So, but I don't know that was the best idea in the world, but we'll see what happens. You always have to wait to see what happens. But so I would just add that I would like to see the county get back full-fledged involved in it in one form or another, and I would encourage people who are concerned about social issues, about war, being against war, being against police brutality, being against homelessness,
hunger.
Yeah, being against hunger, being in favor of affordable housing, all those social issues. I would encourage them to continue to come out to support the march.
Wow. Well, thank you. This has been a great conversation, and I've been had the opportunity to speak with the icon, Mario Salas.
Don't tell nobody else.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, all right, thank you.